Welcome to the Grokshop. In this video, I'll be doing a repair on an LG refrigerator model LFX25973ST. Specifically, I'll be making a repair to the ice and water dispenser area where the ice dispenser flap gets stuck in the open position. For this project, I did reference the LG owner's manual and LG service manuals. They weren't all that useful for this particular project, but for other projects, they might be more useful. I'll provide links to these below. Okay, to get started, we want to switch off the indoor ice maker and remove the indoor ice bin. Now, for most refrigerator repairs, you want to unplug the refrigerator before starting the service. In this case, I'm leaving it plugged in because I need power in order to test out the mechanism. Also, since the flap is stuck in the open position, I took a towel and stuffed it down the chute to keep some of the cold air from escaping. Probably the most challenging part of this project is removing that front dispenser panel assembly very carefully and without breakage. This is a quote I found on the Appliantology website where they're saying LG said it's okay if some plastic tabs break off in this process, so you take that for what it's worth, but I'll link this below so you can see for yourself. Here's the applicable bit from the LG service manual. To me, it looks like they switched up two photos here, but they recommend start pulling from the right side of the dispenser. That didn't work for me. After removing the drain, I found it helpful to take a paint scraper and put some tape on the end, slip that into the seams at the bottom, and then just start tugging at the bottom until you hear kind of a pop. And then I work my way around towards the right and the top. By using this approach, I didn't lose any tabs, although a couple of them looked like they had been stressed a bit. But overall, it's pretty disappointing LG didn't design the refrigerator to afford better access to service this dispenser area. A final piece of the puzzle, the dispenser flapper, when it's open, will interfere with the removal of the panel. So you actually have to stick your fingers up through the chute and get that flapper out of the way in order to get it all the way open. I didn't want to disconnect any of the assembly controls, so I just propped the assembly up to the side so I could still access those controls in order to do the diagnostics. Although this fridge is only about 5 years old, there's a lot of mold and mildew. All of this should be cleaned up as part of the repair process. Straight away after removing the dispenser assembly, I could see there's a problem with a screw post, and this appeared to be directly connected to the flapper control arm assembly. So with that post broken, the screw had actually shifted off to one side, and I just slipped it back over into the right position, and what do you know, right away the flapper closes. So it looks like that'll be the first order of business to make that repair, but before starting the repair, I think it's a good time to do the cleanup. Your hard plastic surfaces are going to be very easy to clean. However, the rubber material of the flap itself is very difficult to clean. I ended up soaking it in bleach overnight, and that seemed to do the trick for me. Also, I did find a little bit of mold and mildew around this clear plastic chute on the inside of the dispenser assembly, so I went ahead and cleaned this too. So by observing the motor action, pinning the screw down with my finger and using a screwdriver to simulate the motor, it quickly became obvious this was in fact the root cause of the flap issue. So next I just wanted to get the old screw and the broken post piece out. So looking carefully at the base of this broken post, I noticed there's still a pretty good bit of material left to work with there. Now there's a few different ways you can deal with these broken posts, but since there's a lot of material at the base, I figure a longer screw is going to be the easiest option. To use the longer screw method, you really want to match the threads if at all possible, because if you try to use bigger threads, you could end up breaking the plastic. I had another screw that was a little bit longer with the same threads, but it wasn't really quite long enough. I want to make sure I've got enough to grab hold of there. So I went ahead and got a new bag of number 4 screws. I had to buy 22 of them, but it was only like $1.50. In order to get better access to this broken post area, I decided to remove this metal retaining clip, which holds that upper rod in place, which is sort of the pivot rod for the whole assembly. This allows you to move that rod sort of up and out of the way so we can get access to the area as needed. Because of the way it fits together, I still need that little broken piece. And so what I decided to do was to just drill it out and make it into kind of a standoff. And I just chose a bit that was just big enough so the screw with the right threads would slide easily right through there without making it any bigger. In case you're wondering, I was using crimpers to hold it because when I tried to use the vise, it was putting a little too much pressure on it and kind of ovalizing the hole, and I didn't want that. I want to keep the hole perfectly round for the screw. When putting the standoff back on, I want to line up the base with the broken piece just as they were where they broke off, so it fits nice and flush. And I started to use super glue, but I decided not to because I didn't want the super glue bonding the screw with the base part in case it ever needed to come out. I thought it could break it or something. So I just screwed it straight in with no glue at all. Now I'm screwing in the retainer flange, and then I'm just going to test it out manually, make sure that everything moves correctly, and then I'll test it out using the control from the dispenser panel. Okay, with the flap controller now operational, I'll go ahead and reassemble the flap itself. The flap consists of 3 pieces, a piece of styrofoam which goes into this hard plastic shell, and then the rubber surround. So now I'll just reattach the flap to the flap control arm and then test it all out using the dispenser control panel. Next, I did a first cut trying to reinstall the dispenser assembly and then ran into a problem and wouldn't go in. Eventually, I figured out the plastic chute here, the clear one that I removed and cleaned, had some interference. It just wasn't quite seated in there just right. And it's not super obvious, but there's a couple tabs right above where the screws go in. Those tabs have to be seated properly or you'll just have like 1 or 2 millimeters of interference, but that's enough to keep it from going in there. Okay, so now with that clear chute properly aligned, the dispenser assembly should go in with relative ease. The one thing to watch out for is all the wiring. There's a couple big wire bundles back there and some additional wiring. You want to make sure it doesn't also interfere and it doesn't get pinched when you push the assembly back in there. That being said, it's just a matter of applying even pressure all the way around until you hear those lock tabs lock into position. Okay, next I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the drain. Then after this, I'll reinstall that upper ice bin and turn that ice maker back on. Also, since this unit has dual ice makers, I took some ice from the lower ice maker and put it in the upper bin so that I could test everything out. So that's it for this video. I hope you found it helpful. Be sure to stay tuned for more appliance repair videos. But as far as repairing this model LG refrigerator with the ice flap stuck open due to a broken screw post, that's how it's done.
last week you called me. The way you're talking is driving me insane. Hello, hello.